By character development, what I meant is we don't find a character moving from what we say early stages in life and going through the struggles and so on. So that is not at all necessary to teach empathy. I have listened to certain such renderings of poetry and so on, wonderful conversations and everything. That's possible. So if you can really get some good reading of the short story with all the emotions, after every reading, the teacher actually asks them questions, WH questions, yes or no questions, like that. And as the reading progresses, the teacher has to increase the level of those questions. I'm very happy to share some of my accrued information and knowledge regarding how we can handle a story in the classroom. It has, of course, it all depends on the kind of aim and objective that you have before you when you deal with a short story in the class. Primarily, of course, at the school level, definitely you are teaching a short story in order to improve their language, and there is no doubt about that. And at the same time, as we understand, the objective of humanities, especially literature, is not just language improvement. Of course, language improvement is part and parcel of that, but stories we must teach. If it were in another language, not English or another language, still it holds true, because it actually helps us transmit our values, our culture, our reasons for living, and therefore we just can't think of a world without stories. And as far as English language is concerned, teaching a short story in the classroom has therefore multiple benefits. It leads to their 4 language skills: reading, writing, speaking and listening, and it improves their the 2 aspects of language, grammar and vocabulary, and then more importantly, it helps them critically evaluate people and events in the form of stories. Okay. So my presentation has what we say 2 important parts. First part is for teachers only, in the sense for a kind of it is not to be transmitted to the students. That is what I mean by only for teachers. But then without this, you won't be able to do the second part, that is how to transact a story in the class. And for this, I have taken one short story, which I think is in the NCERT syllabus, that is The Happy Prince by Oscar Wilde. So what I'm going to do is, I shall tell you what to look for in a short story when you teach. I mean, when you get a short story for your personal reading, when you get a short story you teach in the class, of course you have to read through that. And when you read through that in your own privacy, at the comfort of your home, when you read that, as by way of preparation, what are the things that you have to look for in a short story. And it is with that knowledge that you have to go to the classroom. So there are two important things that you have to understand when you approach a short story. First of all, you should know the content. There's no doubt what the story is all about. Number two, you should understand that story in terms of the important elements of the story. Only then will you be able to do justice to the transaction part. So let us begin. Am I audible? Am I clear?
Yes, sir. Yes.
No problem. No? Okay. Thank you. Thank you. A short story as a branch of literature actually has a very short, I mean, it is of late beginning. It actually begins in the United States. And formally or generally, it is agreed that Edgar Allan Poe in the late 19th century actually began this genre, or he defined this. Okay. And typically, these are all just what you see in the first slide is just for information. These are all little not very important. I mean, the first one is, of course, technical knowledge. That's all. Typically, a short story consists of 3,000 to 6,000 words, but then a lot of exceptions are there. There are short stories less than 1,000 words, but very effective, But there are short stories which run into a novella, a mini novel like that. These are all general consensus only. And there are normally there are three scenes in a short story, I mean, three locations you can see. There are no elaborate descriptions as we find in novels and so on. And whichever scene is evoked there, it is through concrete descriptions, not elaborate narrations and so on. And the number of characters are also very limited, 3 to 6 characters. But you will find in the short story that we are dealing with today, effectively there are only 2 characters, but there are other minor characters at the same time. Effectively there are only 2 characters. So these are all general consensus. Don't take it for sacrosanctum. It is of general value only, just to give us a direction. Okay, you can. And unlike in the novel, you will not find any kind of character development in the story, in a short story. Okay, we find a character at a particular moment in his life or her life, and we find certain actions which are part of the state of life. That is how we normally find a short story. Okay, go to the next slide, please. To the next slide. Okay. And then you have to understand 2 other important aspects of the story or elements of the short story: the structure of the story. That is, you will find, say for example, a short story is progressing in a particular way, and then suddenly there is a reversal of the fortunes. You can find that. This is called ironic reversals. Or in certain other stories, you will find epiphanic moments. I mean, a character is actually living a normal life, but then while walking along the street or meeting meeting an old friend, or watching a movie, they are reminded of something in their past life. And then the story begins to revolve around that particular event or particular state of their life, which is in the past. So, or you can also find the pure narration from the beginning to the end, sequential narration you can find. And Happy Prince, as you are going to see, or as you already know, it basically resorts to this pure narration technique. And then another important point that you should also look for while reading a short story is point of view. You are, as teachers of English, you must know that there are two important points of view: the first person point of view and the third person point of view. And both points of view have their own merits as well as demerits. For example, the first person narrative, it has, say, it lends authenticity to the narration. That means it uses the pronoun I. The narrator uses the pronoun I. So while I was doing that, while I was doing this, or when I was in Delhi, like that. So the I pronoun used frequently for narration suggests that it is a first person narrative. So the narrator is part of the action of the story. And the advantage of this is it lends credibility to the narration. That means the narrator is saying something which he or she knows through and through. That is the kind of understanding that they have. Or that is the impression that such a kind of narration gives us, first person narration. And the second person narration, I'm sorry, the third person narration, it is also known as omniscient narration. Omniscient, that means it is all knowing. They know the hearts of the characters. The narrator knows what is happening in the heart of the characters. They have an access to their innermost thoughts. In the first person narrative, none of such things are possible. But in the third person narrative, everything is possible. So that is why it is known as omniscient, all-knowing narration. And in a short story, the point of view does not change in between. So once you begin with a particular point of view, for example, third person narrative, it continues to be so all through. That is normally happening in a short story. So what I am suggesting is, when you get hold of a short story, when you read through the content, maybe through the second reading or the third reading, you must search for these elements also. What's the point of view of this? What is the structure of this short story, like that? Okay, so the next slide, please. Okay, then you should also know about the narrative modes as such. There are various ways in which the content can be presented. It can be in the form of description of people and places. It can be in the form of comments by the narrator, generalizations, judgments, observations, which the observations which are which normally the ordinary person misses. So very interesting observations made by an astute observer. Okay, so the narrator makes all these. Sometimes you can find the story moving forward through reporting. Characters come and report what happened elsewhere or other times. So that is, and it is marked by the use of past tense and action verbs. That is the speciality of this report. You can identify which is report and which is a narration by looking for these. Very often they use action verbs. Action verbs are different from state verbs and so on. And there are conversations, dialogues made use of profusely in these short stories. So in other words, the content of a short story is in the form of either a combination of this. It may not be completely description, it may not be completely generalizations or judgments or observations. It may not be a report only, it may not be speech. For example, in the short story that we are going to deal with today, The Happy Prince, you can find a predominance of speech, the dialogues and reports. And there are some judgments and generalizations and observations, and very little of description. Okay, description is also there, but it has the last place. It is predominantly made up of report and speech. That is, you will find that. Okay. Okay. Next slide, please. Now, let us recapitulate what we have already seen. So, when you read a short story, you should be, of course, focusing on the content, what is actually the content of the short story, and then you should also equally be familiar with the, the elements of the story, especially structure, its characters, how many characters are there, how many scenes are there, or you should be aware when the location changes, the scene changes, you should be able to mark that. How or is it predominantly located in one particular scene, or does it change places or scenes like that? So that is how a teacher has to read the story. Okay, I'm not suggesting that you should make all these elements available to the students, because students are of various capacities. Their English background may not be very good. So if you have a very good pack of students, then you can try all this. But the teacher must be in the know of all these different story. These different elements. So the structure, the scenes, the characters, and the narrative, the point of view, and the narrative mode. These are things that you have to be familiar with. So it is not enough that you know the content of the story. That is what I am suggesting. That is what I am suggesting here. And then we have already seen the short story is of limited length. And then that means you have limited data available to you. And to interpret a story, therefore, you should pay attention to every word, every sentence, and even between the lines. In other words, interpreting a short story is predominantly making inferences from available data. It's a kind of it needs practice, and as teachers of as students of literature, I'm sure all of you have studied at least BA literature or MA literature. Okay, so if you have done MA literature, definitely you have been trained in that. But if not, at least if you have done BA literature, you must have some kind of an introduction to all these different inferences that you are able to, how to read between the lines of a short story. Means what you find on the pages is data, different types of data, and you have to draw different conclusions based on that. That is what I'm suggesting. So interpreting a short story is not just paraphrasing it. No, absolutely not. You should be able to uh, mm, uh, make bold guesses, imaginative, uh, uh, what we say, understanding of what is being suggested through these short stories. Through the story. And you have to, for that, you have to pay attention to the length, the scenes, the different scenes, the characters, the structure, the point of view, and the narrative mode. And in addition to that, you should pay more attention to, special attention to the beginning and the end. Okay. For example, when I say the beginning of a short story, what I mean is, if it's a 500 or 1,000-word long short story, the first 100 words or 200 words, that is the beginning of a short story. Okay. And in the first part of the story, in a 1,000-word long story, in the first 200 words, you will get the time of the story. What is the time? Time frame within which the story take place, the action of the story take place, and the place where it happens. Maybe it's a city, maybe it is a rural place, or sometimes what we say, the suburb, like that. So the place, and when you speak about the time, it can be a particular month or a day or even a season. You understand? It can be in our own sense. We'll have to say we have in Kerala we have the rainy season, the monsoon, and then a mild winter, and then summer season. That is what we have in Kerala. But in all over India, you have say the winter is there. Then you have spring, a slight rainy season, then autumn. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. After winter, you have a short spring, then a very what we say excruciating summer, and then you have a slight rainy season, then autumn, and then the winter again. That is how it goes. In the West, it is spring, summer, autumn, and winter. So all these are possible. So you have to look for, especially you are reading English short stories, maybe seasons play a predominant role in that. So time, place, then the protagonist, who is the main character. That also you have to look for that, who is the main character. Then an outline of the basic action. What is the main action that you can find in the story? Is there a conflict, or is it a struggle? Or sometimes there may not be any obvious struggle there. There may not be obvious. I mean, of course, there are the intensity of the struggle or the conflict may be different, but there will be some kind of conflict or struggle, and it is that which actually suggests the basic action around which the story moves. Then the setting actually means there are three elements in the setting: the background, then the color, the tone. The tone also is important because it suggests not only the physical background, is it a bright, shiny, or somber. It is suggestive of the psychological mood of the play also, of the story also. So that is why the tone of the story is important, because it gives us an idea about the psychological makeup of the characters, as well as their attitudes, the attitudes of the various characters in the play. That actually sets the setting of the story. Okay. And the next slide, and that is, then we should also pay attention to the end of the story. I told you we have to give, when you begin to interpret a story, you have to pay attention to all the important elements, as well as to the beginning and the ending of the play. And very often short stories will have a very effective, because it's very short, and to add to the effect, it will have a very interesting ending. Sometimes it is an ironic ending. You have been expecting something, and towards the very end, you can find an ironic reversal of the whole thing, and that reversal actually makes us rethink about whatever we have thought about the story, the action, as well as the characters, and so on. So you should pay very much great attention to how the story ends. It could be an irony, or it could be expressed through a very short sentence, or it could also be expressed through the different tone. What we say, it can move from informal to the formal, or formal to the informal. Okay, or it can also invite us. The end of the story can invite us to something which is mentioned at the beginning of the story. If a circle has come full, so that is the kind of impression it gives us. Or it can also invite our attention to the title of the story as such. Or it can also end in the death or the disappearance of the protagonist, the main character. Or it can also suggest the ending through a fragmented syntax. So far, the story has been narrated or narrated in full sentences, but in the end we have a fragmented sentence, suggesting that it has got a special meaning there. So that is as a teacher, we have to pay attention to all these. Okay, now let us take. I'm sure that you know the short story Happy Prince. Okay, next slide. Okay, so the original story uh, is around 3,000 words. But in the NCERT textbook, it is less than that. There's a lot of editing has gone into that. And if we go by the edited version, then as for the scene, there are mainly 4 scenes you can find. You can primarily it takes place in the heart of a city. To be more precise, the city is unnamed. The city is unnamed, but it is very clear it is a European city. You can take it because it is written by Oscar Wilde. It is an English city. It is London, or whatever be that. And the primary or the predominantly the action takes place at the top of a tower or a column where a statue of the Happy Prince stands, and that is the principal locale. But then you will find the location changes to the house of a widow whose son is sick, and who is trying to make the wedding gown of a princess. And it also goes to the attic of a young gentleman who is struggling to finish a play. And it also moves briefly to the foot of that column or that tower where a little girl stands. And these are the 4 important scenes that you can find. But in on the original story, you will find the scene where the swallow, the bird, the original habitat of the swallow is also mentioned at the beginning of the story. So these are the scenes. Then there are predominantly 2 characters. There are a number of minor characters, but the story revolves around the statue of the Happy Prince and a bird, which is the variety of that bird is swallow. Okay. And the structure, I am going forward with the understanding that the participants know the story. And if not, maybe you can read the story at your own. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that acknowledgement. Okay, thank you. And then the point of view. Now, when you look at the story, you understand it is third-person point of view, third-person narration. Okay. Omniscient narration, that is what you can find. Of course, it gives a lot of freedom to the narrator, because standing from the position of the Happy Prince, the narrator can see everywhere in the city, across the city, even beyond the city, and what is happening in their minds. All these things are possible. So, and as for the narrative mode, you will find a predominance of speech and report, and some comments also. In the original story, a lot of general comments also are made. You can find judgments, or subtle judgments are also made. General comments are made about the state of England during the time, during the late Victorian times. That is what you find. So, but a predominance of speech and report you can find, because by report I mean the swallow goes to the lady, to the young man and the girl, and it also reports how young children spend the winter nights, how the adults treat them. All these are reported back to the happy prince, and which actually, hearing that report, the happy prince makes the swallow to take different parts, all the foils of gold which is covering the body of the happy prince, and distribute it to different types, different groups of people in the city, so that they can come out of their penury, their poverty, and they can have warm clothes, or good food, all those things. So that is what you find in the narrative mode. Next, please. Next. Okay. And as for the now we are going to focus on the beginning part, the time. When in the first part of the story, it is very clear that the time is late autumn and early winter, because it is suggested there that the birds, his companion birds, have already left for Egypt. They actually left 6 weeks back. You understand? So, and there are also, towards the end of the story, also you will find suggestions regarding how cold winter affects all of them, and how the little bird dies of winter and so on. You'll find, so it is at the beginning of the story. When the story begins, it is late autumn and early winter. Okay. Then the place is, of course, an unnamed city in Europe, and we can take in England itself. And protagonist is the statue of the Happy Prince. And the action basically revolves around the Happy Prince in his attempt to help people in distress. That is the main action of the story. And the setting, the background is basically a city center in Europe. And you will find, as for the tone of the story, when you read through the different reports, the different dialogues, different comments of the story, you will find there is a lot of sincerity on the part of the Happy Prince and the swallow, the bird. And but then there is tragedy everywhere, how poor people suffer, and there's a lot of melancholy and tragedy, and a lot of social criticism there, because how people in power, people of wealth, people who can, how they do not do anything. And dark humor is there, because you find ultimately, when it comes to helping poor people, real living people, it comes to a lifeless statue. Even the lead heart of a statue is at pain. It is melting. It is full of the milk of human kindness. Even a leaden, a heart made of lead is moved to tears. But human beings are not at all moved. They are so numb towards the suffering of the people. So the dark humor is very well placed through the suggestion of how the statue is moved, all those things. Okay. And then the ending also is very interesting, because it ends in basically towards the very end, we find it is a tragedy, utter tragedy, because those who are moved by human kindness, those who, it is ultimate sacrifice by the bird and the Happy Prince. He gives everything. It is self-abnegation on the part of the prince. It gives everything that is valuable about him. Its possession, the ruby is given away, its eyes are given away, its gold foils are given away, everything is given away. It is ready to go to the extent of making it very ugly. You understand? It is, in the words of one of the counselors, it is little. It is no better than a beggar. So the Happy Prince was once beautiful, very beautiful to look at, but now he has been completely disformed, and it is out of shape, out of beauty, but it doesn't care about that. So the real, and so it is utter tragedy. But we find the statue is being melted. eh? It is thrown into the furnace, and the bird dies of cold. But in the very last sentence, we find the lead heart of the happy prince and the dead body of the swallow become the most precious things in the world. It is found out by the angel sent out by God. The God has sent out an angel asking it to find out the two most precious things on earth, and these two things turn out to be the most precious things. So it is not utter tragedy, but there is hope there is light at the end of the tunnel. That is the suggestion there. That is why I told you it is tragic, and it is tragic. The ending is tragic, but there is an ironic reversal at the very end. Okay. Okay. Then now, when you take this short story, Nicey, how long can I go?
We can take another 5 minutes, sir. 5 or 10.
5 minutes. Okay.
5 or 10 minutes, yeah.
5. Okay, fine. So there are 4 important things that you have to follow when you begin to transact a story like this. Okay. First of all, for the first step is introduction and setting the task. Task setting, I mean, by that introduction, you are trying to prepare the children for listening to the story. Okay. So instead of reading the story right away, you may have to speak about the author a little bit, not elaborate introduction to the author and so on, but a very sketchy introduction to the author, his times and his origin, his country, where he comes from, the type of writer he is. Very sketchy introduction to the author, and I mean, something that relatable to the content of the story, something from our daily lives. That is how you have to begin the introduction. So much so that the children are ready for listening to the story. And then the second step is reading and listening. Reading and listening. What I mean is, I think the novice teachers in this group may have a doubt. What should be the story? So of course you can introduce the story as I told you, but then when you begin actually the text, how are you going to do that? And my experience suggests that the teacher, especially in areas where the standard of English of the students is not very good, what you can do is you can give a loud reading of the story in the class. You understand? That means the students are not made to read. The teacher has to give a good reading, because when you read, what you are doing is you are giving them some training in proper, on oral training. It is actually a training in speech as well as in what we say oral transaction. Not just reading as such, because you are pronouncing words properly there, and you are reproducing sentences, conversations with all those emotions and tone and so on. When you vary your tone, as if the bird and the statue are speaking, when you adopt their tone, their attitudes, their emotions, the whole thing becomes a conversation. That's why loud reading by the teacher of the short story becomes a good oral training. You understand? And let the students listen with the books closed. That is the most important part of it. The first reading by the teacher should be listened to with the text closed, because if they have the text open in front of them, the listening won't be proper. They will be preoccupied with finding out the part you are reading. So there is no proper listening happening there. And uh, then once you finish the first reading with the students listening to you, of course, I know when the students do not actually follow English properly, you might ask, how is it possible? So there, you have to tell them it is not important to understand each word, each sentence. They can, there are sentences or even paragraphs which they may not even follow, but assure them it is not at all a problem. What you are making them listen is to gain an overall impression about the story, not the niceties or the details of the story. No, the teacher should not look for a detailed understanding at the first reading. Just make them listen to something in English, and let them understand some very general ideas about the story. That's enough. That's more than enough. And remember, it is not important. Even for reading also, it is true that for a novice reader, for a person who doesn't have much grounding in the language, it is not important to understand every word or every sentence, even paragraphs. They can still go on reading even without understanding. It still makes sense of the story. Okay, assure them that, because when they get into such a habit, slowly, maybe over a period of time, maybe over a period of 3 to 6 months, they will begin to read on their own. So the teachers, as teachers, we have to assure them that it is really possible, it's really okay to read without understanding every sentence, every expression, every word. They don't have to even look for dictionary also. Let them make bold guesses about the meaning of difficult words. That's enough, because that is how we all read stories. I mean, that is how we all read anything, any unknown material. Suppose we read an editorial of the newspaper today in English. There are a number of words which you may not know, but still we go on reading and make sense of that. And we have to transact that confidence to the students also. It is not necessary for them to understand every word. And then there must be a second reading. You can go to the next slide, please. Next slide. Okay. 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 You can go to the next slide also, please, because I have already covered this for lack of time. So during this first reading, the teacher can make some kind of innovations. Suppose in order to make them, because they are not opening the text, they don't look at the text, they are only listening to you. In order to make their understanding easier, you can draw some sketches if you want, or you can write some difficult words on the blackboard or the whiteboard and give them, explain the meaning if you want, or you can, if not, you can replace some difficult words in the text with some new words, some easier words. You can do all those things, but the reading must be uninterrupted. That is important, because you should prepare for such a kind of innovation beforehand. Only then you should make the reading. If you are going to make all the innovations while reading, it is going to be a problem. Okay, the next slide, please. Then there must be a second round of reading again by the teacher. This time, the student can open their book and listen. Follow the text in the while the teacher reads. Okay, this time there must not be any additions or deletions. It should be as it is given in the text. Okay. And the third round of reading, maybe depending on the nature of the students, you may have to repeat this another round, another round of loud reading. And after that, once you know, I mean, of course, in between that, after each round of reading, you can make them, or you can actually ask some very general questions regarding the content of the story. Very general questions, not very difficult one, very general questions, which will make them focus on the story again. So when you know that they are doing that, when they are able to focus on the story, follow you reading, then you have to make them read by themselves. That is silent reading by the students. It is simultaneous. It is silent reading, and for that you have to stipulate time. You cannot let it go on endlessly. Rather, it is a silent reading. I mean, a limited time should be available. Of course, depending on the nature of the students, their level and so on. I mean, depending on your availability of time and so on, you can prolong it or reduce it. Okay, please, next one. Then the third level, the third step is exploiting the text in speech and writing. Okay, this one, in order to reproduce the text, I mean, reproduce the content, you can ask WS questions. That is, again, we have already done that after the first and the second or the third level, round of reading. And you can add to such questions, if there are such questions still remaining, you can ask, and for that, so it will help them comprehend the question, comprehend the content of the story better. So you have to, what we say, the teacher has to prepare these questions in advance, only then it is. And it could be WS questions, true or false questions, or choice-based question, multiple choice questions. You can also ask them meaning of words and phrases. Only after these 3 or 4 rounds of making them familiar with this. And these exercises will make them focus on the text more and more. And you can make them answer the questions. Certain questions, they should answer without the help of the text. And that you have to make them close the text and answer it. And certain questions which we can make them open the text and look through the text and find out. Okay. And there are some grammar awareness also can be given through that, by way of grammar, but not take every grammar points. Some very 1 or 2 elements of grammar. That's all. Maybe a reported speech. If there is a reported speech, you can show some samples from the text. You can introduce what is reported speech and take some samples from the text. So like that, maximum 2, minimum 1. Some grammar. So you have done vocabulary, you have done grammar, you have done content. You can also make them, you can just ask them some specific dates or some data, and ask them to answer them quickly. So that is a training in scanning the text, So, there are different types of reading: scanning, skimming, intensive reading, all those things, So you have made them read intensely, and now you are asking them to scan the text. Different dictation is a wonderful area here. This time dictation is not done by teacher, rather it is done by, you can divide the students into groups, maybe 3 or 4 groups, or groups of 3 or 4, and let each student read 1 or 2 sentences, not words, but sentences should be dictated. So it has got multiple advantages because it helps the students read loudly. We are not making them read longer passages, but 1 or 2 sentences only. It actually gives them some training in loud reading, and it gives the other students training in listening and spelling. You understand? They have to write that. So dictation of sentences in groups of small groups of students is a wonderful exercise here. Then there must be query time. After doing all these, then you can ask them, so the students to ask anything that they want to ask about the Happy Prince. I mean, I'm just giving an example here, or the swallow, but their own. Why did the swallow do all these things and sacrifice itself? There are a number of questions that they have. Sometimes some people may say that both the Happy Prince and the swallow are foolish. So let them ask anything that. So query time and discussion time, I mean, they can go together, or you can keep them separately, because in discussion time you can arrange a debate between students, or a debate or a discussion like that. Okay, one more. Okay, then the last one is writing. You have to make the text go I mean, you can make the students go beyond the text. So writing. So first one is writing a review. Review is basically a paraphrase. Let them summarize in their own words. Okay, there will be a lot of grammar mistakes, but don't worry about that. Make them write in their own broken English. It is important. So having done all these things in class, you have transacted the story in the class, and let them make a summary, a paraphrase in their own words. And here also group work can help them a lot, because if they are unable to make the summary by themselves, let them do it in groups. Each student contributing at least one sentence. It is not one student contributing everything, rather, and others sitting idly. No, make sure that every member contributes at least only one idea, one sentence. Let it be broken sentence, but that is a beginning for them to write. You understand? And finally, if the students are good enough, you can take the the story beyond the text. Ask them to give a different ending to the story. Ask them to make a short presentation, or a short play, a one-act play, or a short scene based on this, like that. And let them write down the dialogues, like that. And the final point I have to remind you is, it is not possible for a teacher to do everything in one go. No, not at all. You have to plan your sessions like that, and never think that everything has to be done in one class and so on. And now all these ideas, all these steps may not be possible with every short story. Depending on the nature of the short story, it differs. But still, if you have these guidelines before you, you can pick and choose according to the nature of your students, your availability. I mean, the time, the availability of time, and your readiness, all those things.
Sir, you mentioned that character development is limited in short stories. So how can teachers still use them to teach empathy and emotional depth?
By character development, what I meant is, we don't find a character moving from what we say early stages in life and going through the struggles and so on. So that is not at all necessary to teach empathy. And so, for example, take this story of Happy Prince and the Swallow. We actually catch them at one particular point in their life. You understand? The swallow was actually flying to escape the harsh winter of Europe to Egypt. So during that time, we only see them only for a few days. And actually the story is a photograph. It's actually a photograph of their life at that particular moment. And what it reveals is a heart of gold. You understand? Even though it is ironically suggested that the Happy Princess heart is made of lead. At the end, it is suggested. We can infer that the heart of the Happy Prince, the statue, was made of gold as such. So what more? So when you focus on the kind of interaction between, the kind of conversation, and the what we say, the emotions it evokes in both the bird and the statue, you are actually moved to tears. So character development is not at all necessary in order to evoke empathy, because this story is very good. It is very suggestive of that. Okay.
And so you mentioned that teachers should read the text aloud first. So in today's
Yeah.
digital classrooms, do you think AI narrations or audiobooks can replace this traditional role effectively?
Um, there is a school which thinks like that, because I mean, of course, students can do that in their own privacy. There's no problem. But in the classroom, when the teacher teaches it, if the teacher is not confident that he or she won't be able to give a good reading, it's really possible. No problem with that. What is important is to subject the students to a good rendering of the story. That is the most important part. So if the teacher doesn't think that they can't actually do justice to that task, and if there are what we say, digital platforms available doing that, I have even heard that like that. I have listened to certain such renderings of poetry and so on. Wonderful conversations and everything. That is possible. So if you can really get some good reading of the short story with all the emotions and so on, done by a chatbot, you can use that, no problem. But it should be done by a teacher. That's important. A teacher has to, it should be the work of a teacher. I mean, it should be the initiative of a teacher. That is what the teacher has to control the class. That is important. The teacher
Yes.
can use it as a tool, definitely you can use it as a tool, no problem.
Okay, sir, to develop critical thinking, it is important to read and try to understand the context. So, isn't it the job of a teacher to teach the learners to understand from certain hints given by the author?
Definitely. That is why. So the teacher is not actually giving the answers. The teacher, after every reading, the teacher actually asks them questions, WS questions, yes or no questions, like that. And as the reading progresses, the teacher has to increase the level of those questions. They have to make them read between them, if possible. Only the teacher knows the level of the students, and depending on that, they have to make them read between the lines, or suggest how, for example, in the Happy Prince itself, let us say, um, uh, so how dark humor plays an important role. Dark humor. That is, when human beings are suffering around you, the wealthy people and the learned people, the powerful people, they are completely numb to that. They are ignorant about that. But it actually took a lifeless statue and a non-human being to take pity on these suffering human beings. It's actually and again, the last episode, I mean, God asking the angel to find out two most precious things on earth. It finds out a heart made of lead as the most precious thing on earth. It's actually a dark humor. So it is the teacher has to suggest all these things through their query, through the discussion, through the debates, or through the review that they are going to make. Any of these, I mean, it should not be given right away to the students. In other words, there is a very important thing that I forgot to mention, but something that is very important when you transact a short story in the class. That is, meaning is not as important as meaning making. something that you have to take to the heart. Meaning of the story is not as important as meaning making. And who is making the meaning? The readers, the students. So we have to train them in and through these activities, in and through all these 4 steps I have told you, in and through that, or even beyond that, you are actually help them make sense of the story by themselves. You are not telling them this is the meaning of the story. Okay.
Yes. We have one more question. Like some problems students face may be the language used by foreign authors, the style of writing. So how can teachers help in that?
Okay. I think NCRT has abridged the story, and the original story is not at all in the. So that is what I'm suggesting is abridgment. Yeah, abridgment is one of the or simplification is one of the possibilities. But then it is not actually possible for a teacher to do it alone. It should the institution has to come forward with helping out that. Otherwise, simplifying a short story without losing its charm is a daunting task. That is really. So what NCRT has done is, of course, it has reduced the length of the story drastically, and it has simplified some of the words, also original words. But I am sure that even with that, there are groups of students in every part of India for them it is extremely difficult. And if you are a conscientious teacher, the only way out I have found out is to simplify it by yourself. That is the only way.
And so in English language, as per NEP 2020, it's not just to improve literary skills, but also to develop various competencies outlined in NCF. So does the strategy you outlined help in that?
Okay, I think I have touched upon all the 4 skills. LSRW is made use of in this strategy because we make them listen to something, read it, write, and speak through in and through discussion. There is speech, debate, and so on. There is speech. So speaking, reading, writing, and listening, all these things are available in these 4 steps I have told you. I have transacted now. And in addition to that, critical thinking is also integrated into that. Grammar and vocabulary also is part of that. 4 skills and 2 aspects of language. 4 skills, LSRW, and 2 aspects of language are grammar and vocabulary. I told you, let us not overdo grammar, but we have to do 2 obvious, or oft repeated grammar points in every lesson. That is important. And some important vocabulary. And as for vocabulary, I should also remind you about one thing. There are 3 types of vocabulary: active vocabulary, passive vocabulary, and ad hoc vocabulary. And as a teacher in the classroom, you should only promote active vocabulary. Active vocabulary is vocabulary which you have to use, or which is available to you for production, for writing and speech, and what we say, or which you think that should be made available. There are certain words which should be part of the active, productive vocabulary of a student. The teacher can decide on that, and you have to teach them in detail. The passive vocabulary are words which you are able to recognize. When you read that, you don't know the meaning as such, but you can guess. You know the meaning, but then you are unable to use them in productive phase, or you cannot. When you write them, it doesn't come to you. When you speak, it doesn't come to you. Such words you can. Such words. You can make a list of such words. These are passive vocabulary as far as these students are concerned. They may not be able to use them actively in their use at this level. So you can, what we say, give the meaning of those words very quickly and do not dwell on such words during teaching, during the classroom. Don't take your too much classroom time for that. And the third category is ad hoc vocabulary, which are useful only in that particular context. You give the meaning of those words even in the mother tongue and make them understand the sense of that expression there and dismiss that. That's all. But you have to spend time on active vocabulary. That is what you have to understand. So grammar and vocabulary, then critical thinking. The whole exercise is actually make the children think about what they have read. You understand? So you can, I think all these are all taken care of here.